Hi, I'm Willie Mayette, creator of Jazzedge Academy, and I'm super excited to be teaching this lesson to you, the 8 steps to jazz improvisation for absolute beginners to jazz piano. I've been wanting to do this lesson for a while, and what I'm going to be doing in this lesson is showing you the beginner steps on how to be able to improvise over jazz standards. So what is this improvisation going to sound like? It's going to sound like this. You're going to be able to play this exact improvisation, all right, once you're done with this lesson. Here we go. And not only are you going to be able to play that whole improvisation, you're also going to know exactly what it is you're doing, why it works the way that it works, and also how to reproduce it. If you want to move ahead or you want to go back, also remember that you can use the speed controls as well. So if I'm talking a little bit too much for you, just go ahead and speed it up using the speed controls, and then you can get right into the material. So now let's jump in to step 1. In step 1, when it comes to improvisation, you have to learn a song, right? So jazz musicians use these songs, these lead sheets, these jazz standards as the structure and form that they improvise over. So we're going to be using Autumn Leaves. Sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, so you can learn the song. Don't worry if you need help with this stuff. I have practice actions, which I'm going to explain to you later on in the lesson how to get those. And those are step-by-step videos showing you exactly what it is you need to practice. You can practice along with me. All right, so the first step is learning the song. In the left hand here, what I am doing is I'm playing chord shells. You can get my free Academy Blueprint, the Jazz Piano Beginner Academy Blueprint, all right? And it goes through and explains all of the chord shells to you, root 7s, root 3s, all of that. So if you need help with chord shells, I would definitely suggest checking out that Academy Blueprint. So this first step is relatively simple. You're just going to go ahead and learn the actual song. Now we're only doing 8 measures. Why? Because it's a lot easier for us to improvise over 8 measures, keep that form, stay focused, and actually be able to generate some good improvisation rather than trying to do an entire 32 measures or longer form. Step 2, you really need to know your chords in order to be able to improvise. Now, some teachers will say, hey, look, use your scales. I'm going to offer a counter to that. The reason I would say don't start with scales first is because you've probably heard before, and if not, look it up. You'll see that a lot of times in scales, there will be something called an avoid note. Those are notes that you should, quote unquote, avoid because they don't sound all that great. But what's most important is that chord tones are always going to sound good. So when you improvise, if you utilize chord tones, they're always going to sound good. Whereas you don't have to worry about hitting a note that might sound bad. And when we're starting improvisation, do we really want to start off with a bunch of notes that might sound bad right away? Of course not. All right, so step 2, you're really going to know your chords. So here are all of the chords for the first 8 measures of Autumn Leaves. A minor 7, D7, and you'll notice that within each of these chords, all of the notes are written out. Okay, so they're both written below the chord, but they're also written within the notes themselves. So you want to learn all of these notes. So if I asked you, hey, what's an A minor 7 chord? You say A, C, E, G, right? Those are the notes of my A minor 7 chord. So when I have an A minor 7 chord, I'm just going to play a simple root 3, 7 shell here, and I need to improvise over that A minor 7 chord. Guess what? I could use any of those notes. But not only can I use any of these notes, I could keep going and keep going and keep going, right? I could use any A minor notes. Right? I could use any of those A minor notes, A minor chord tones to be able to improvise over that A minor chord. So it's really, really important that you learn these chord tones. This is a great sheet to print off. It's in the downloads. And then take this along with you to practice these chords. All right, so most students end up failing at the piano because they oversaturate themselves with theory that they don't need right then. Now, obviously, we need to learn theory, but it's really important that you only learn the theory that you need right then. For instance, you know, you're doing 2-5-1 progressions and 2-5-1 licks, but you really don't know how to improvise over a basic tune yet. All right, that's not a good path to follow. You're going to get yourself frustrated. So what I'm going to do here is I'm only giving you the theory that you need to know. Obviously, there's more theory that you can learn, but don't worry about that other theory right now. Just focus on what I'm saying here and don't oversaturate yourself. All right, now step 3, rhythm is key. All right, you need good rhythm in order to be able to improvise. When I show you that example of the A minor chord, all right, I'm not just playing. Right? I mean, if I do that, it doesn't sound all that great. Okay? So I need good rhythm. Okay? Now, the good news is within Jazzedge Academy, there's a whole course all on rhythm, mastering rhythms, vocalizing rhythms, and all of that. But I'm also going to give you 4 rhythms that you can use right now. So now what I'm doing is I have a vocalization approach on these rhythms that I created. This vocalization approach just uses nonsense syllables and words to give you more of a swing feel. Okay, so we're going to do this all in like a jazz 8th note feel, swung feel. So the first note, or the first rhythm is D, ba, da, rest. Okay, D, ba, da, rest. Rhythm number 2, D, ba, ba. And I'm just playing them on the note B. I could clap them, I could play them on any note, doesn't matter, right? Rhythm number 3, a lot of times I'll say right here. I'll give it a but, all right, so ba, triple, let D, ba. Ba, triple, let D, ba. And finally, rhythm number 4, here we go, da, D, ba, da. Now, again, if you need help with those rhythms, check out the practice actions. We'll go through all of those rhythms. You can practice them along with me. In step 2, we had all of the chord tones. So step 2 here, we're learning all of the chord tones. Now, in step 3, we're working on rhythms, right? So these are going to start to come together. So chord tones now in step 2, step 3 is our rhythms. All right, now in step 4, we're going to create an outline of our improvisation. This is something that I like to call a roadmap, and we're going to use these boulders, which are chord tones, to start off our improvisation. All right, so here you can see that, all right, well, what do we have here? We have the first 4 measures of Autumn Leaves, right? A minor 7, D7, G major 7, C major 7th, right? And what you'll notice here is, oh, look, you've got these big notes here, and these notes are the 3rd of the chord, going to the 3rd of the chord, to the 3rd of the chord, to the 3rd of the chord. And notice this little message down here. We could target notes other than the 3rd, but the 3rd and the 7th really help to define the chord. As we move on the F sharp, I'm going to play that note, right? So I'm going to see if you can figure out what that note is on an F sharp, right? On the B, I'm playing that. That should be pretty simple. And on the E, I'm going to play this, right? Those measures are just cut off right now. So if you didn't figure it out, that's the 3rd, the root, and the root. So here we start with the 3rd to the 3rd for D7, 3rd for G major, 3rd for C major, and then finally when we move on to the next few measures, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, I'm hitting the 3rd, the root of B, and the root of E. Okay? Now, why do we start with this roadmap? Well, because these notes help define the shape of our lines, right? Remember, improvisation is all about creating lines. So when I improvise, right? right? Those are all improvisational lines. And you can think of a line as like a sentence. So we put sentences together to form paragraphs, and then that tells our story, right? And you'll notice also within those improvisational lines, I'll go up, I'll go down. It's like kind of weaving, right? So I might be going up and then come down. Right? So coming up, coming down. So that kind of looks like this. I might be going down and then hit that, come up, go down, hit that again, maybe come lower, hit that, right? So I can get that nice wave in my improvisation going on. Super, super important because that creates a lot of good interest in my improvisation. So here in step 4, all I'm doing is I'm just laying down these big boulders, okay? So I'm just hitting the third, to the third, to the third, to the third. I don't have to do the third. I could go with the fifth, to the root, to the third, to the root. I could choose whatever I want. I just happen to choose the thirds here. Okay, so now, another warning. I love winging my improvisation, all right? So when I sit down and improvise, I don't have anything planned out. I just wing it, right? However, if you're getting started with improvising and you're a beginner to jazz piano improvisation, you'll likely find that using this roadmap approach and using this step-by-step approach will at least help you in the beginning so that you have a better understanding of improvisation, right? So if you want to just try winging it, I never say don't do that. Go ahead and do that. But if you start to get frustrated or feel like, oh man, I really don't understand what I'm doing here, then break it down in this step-by-step fashion like we're doing here, okay? All right, now, step number 5. Now that you have your basic roadmap, now we're gonna start to fill in the roadmap using our chord tone ingredients and also our learned rhythms. Now remember, the chord tone ingredients, that was from step 2. Remember in step 2, we had all those chord tones, right? We know A, C, E, G, C, E, G, B, right? We have to say the names of all the chords, right? So those chord tones are what we're considering our ingredients, okay? We're gonna build a recipe here. And then we're gonna use those learned rhythms. Now that could be the rhythms from step number 3 or any rhythm you choose. We're gonna choose the rhythms from step number 3, okay? Those ones that we vocalize. All right, so here, step 4 as a reminder, right? So in step 4, we had the boulders, right? And then now we have all this space in here that what do we need to do? We need to fill that space in with some notes. Okay, so now we get this. Let me go ahead and play it for you. Okay, so what I'm doing here, again, is I'm starting, first of all, right, each one of these lines is starting with those boulders from step number 4. So if you go back to step number 4, we started with a C, right, for the A minor, and then we went down to the F sharp for the D. Well, same thing is going on here. See, we're starting with the C, and then we have the F sharp. Okay, so these are the boulders that we did in step 4. The rest of the notes are chord tones. Now this is super important to remember, and let's just make sure we're all on the same page. When I'm playing that A minor 7 chord, the chord tones that I'm going to use for this entire measure will be coming from that A minor 7 chord. Okay, so when I'm here on this measure on D7, I'm going to be using my D7 chord tones. Okay, so my A minor 7 chord tones are used for that measure because that's the chord of that measure. My D7 chord tones will be used for this measure because that's the chord for that measure. If we take a look at this again, oh, and by the way, you'll also notice that the rhythm that we're using here is rhythm number 1, D ba da, D ba da. Okay, now this is super important. A lot of times students want to just go off and forget it, do my own rhythm and all stuff like that. But this is where, again, I want to caution you, this is where they fall off because they don't have all these other rhythms together. So then you get this kind of stuff. right? And it just kind of falls apart. The time isn't there. So we want to make sure that we have the time together well. Now, how do we do that? Well, one way in which we could do that is let's utilize our iReal Pro track. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play step number 5 along with the backing track, and don't worry, you'll be able to download this backing track. All right, great job. Okay, so step number 5, we're filling in. Remember, we can utilize any of our chord tones, okay? So you could use any chord tone that you want, and just as a quick reminder, let's make sure you understand that I could go in any order that I want, right? So these chord tones that I filled in here, I started here, and I went down like this. I could have gone, or, right? I could have done that. Right? So I can go in any order that I want. I suggest that you think a little bit scalar, meaning that I'm coming down and then I'll jump back up, right? You don't want to, you don't want to jump around too much, because if you're jumping around too much, you might get into some finger placement issues. You can use any notes that you want. I suggest that you don't use tensions at this point, because tensions just are not as strong, right? Use those chord tones for right now. All right, so now let's take a pause at this point and just take stock of where it is that we are and make sure that we're comfortable with everything. So at this point, you should know how to play a lead sheet along with chord shells. If you need help with the chord shells, check out that Jazzedge Academy blueprint on jazz piano. All right. Number 2, you should be able to say the note names of the chord tones. So if I said to you, hey, what are the notes of a C major 7th chord? You're going to say C, E, G, and B. All right. You want to be able to say those as quickly as possible. Those are great things to practice away from the piano. You also want to be able to play a couple of rhythms by heart, right? You want to know these rhythms, you want to vocalize them, and you want to be able to play them steadily, meaning you could play them with a track or with a metronome, right? D ba da, D ba da, D ba da, right? You want to make sure that you can play those rhythms nice and steady in order to be able to improvise. And then finally, number 4, you want to make sure that you could play the shells with the improvisational roadmap, right? So you could you play the shells in the left hand and then do either the 3rd, the 5th, the 3rd, the 5th, the root, the 7th, whatever notes you want. Choose one of your chord tones. So there's one possible roadmap right there. I suggest when you choose your chord tones, don't choose the same tone, meaning don't go from the 3rd of A to the 7th of D, because your line is going to have to come back to that note, right? So you'd have to go, right? You'd have to go back to that note, and it might sound a little less interesting to your ears. Okay, so you're looking for 80% mastery, not 100% mastery. Let's go through that again. What do I mean by 80% mastery versus 100%? Well, what I mean is that, first of all, never strive for 100%. Because, well, you could strive for it, but don't flog yourself and don't get upset if you don't reach 100%, because we're human. We make mistakes. Even the pros make mistakes. So if you're a perfectionist and you're like, oh, it has to be 100%, I'm telling you right now, I've seen it with students year after year, that they get frustrated and they quit because they are a perfectionist and they're thinking everything has to be perfect. Improvisation is an imperfect craft, right? Improvisation is not about being perfect. It's about being able to bob and weave. It's about being loose and being able to react in real time to what's going on, okay? So improvisation is very dynamic. So you're looking for 80% mastery. What is 80%? That means that you could play it most of the time. You might make a mistake now and again, but if I woke you up out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning and said, hey, look, play a C major 7th chord, and you're like, okay, there you go. All right, yeah, I got 80%. So 80% means you got a pretty good handle on this. All right, so now step number 6. Now that we have a basic improvisation, now we're going to spice things up by changing the rhythm. So remember, in step 5, we used the chord tones, ingredients from step number 2. We used a rhythm, one specific rhythm from step number 3, and then we utilized those boulders from step 4, and we created a basic improvisation using that one rhythm, dee ba dee ba da. The problem though is it sounds a little bit boring though, right? Just doing that over and over again. Take a listen to this one now for step number 6. Now, that to my ears sounds much better. It sounds much more interesting. We have some interesting rhythms going on in there. We got a little triplet figure in there that creates a little bit of speed in there. We have that upbeat, right? That's kind of cool. This whole string of eighth notes leading right into that third of the G major 7th, okay? So really kind of interesting rhythms. Now, don't worry if you need help with this. The practice actions, I'll break this down so you know how to play this. But that's our step number 6. We're going to vary the rhythms. You could use any of the 4 rhythms that we did. And all we're doing again is we are applying the notes from the chord to that rhythm. I go into a real deep dive on this in my Confident Improviser program as well. So step 7 now, we're going to start to add in comping, right? So now what is comping? Comping is where we're going to add some rhythm to the chords. We're not just going to play the chords for a whole note and just hold it out. We're going to start to add some rhythm to the chords. Which rhythm do we choose? You can choose whatever rhythm you want, but I suggest that you do this. Number 1, make sure that your comping is light, right? A lot of times if it's a whole note or a half note, I'll play it a little bit short, right? I'll still keep the same time, but I'll play it a little bit short, right? But light, thinking about grabbing at those chords, my pain, tension, and technique lesson is great to take a look at if you need help with your technique, right? So that's the first thing, making sure you're playing those chords light, right? The other thing is make sure that you're not playing too much rhythm, right? Right, that's a little bit too much, right? Remember, the chords are accompanying the right hand improvisation. So you want that. Right, so you see in my comping here, I'm not overdoing it. I'm making sure that the right hand still comes out and you can really hear that right hand. All right, so now you may find it easier to look for holes in the rhythm when you're comping, right? Especially when you're first getting started. Reason for that is when you have an active right hand, okay? So if the right hand is active, I would usually say the left hand should be a little bit less active, at least for right now. As you get better, that will change. So then if the right hand is less active, that's where you could get a little bit more active in that left hand, right? But now as you start to go on, you're going to notice that, okay, the right hand might be active for a few places in the measure, so the left hand is less active, but then you might have some less active spots, but then active spots while the left hand rather is still very active, okay? So you're looking for those holes, right, in the right hand or left hand to be able to decide where you're going to put your comping. So let's take a look at that, right, so you can kind of see. So if we take a look, you'll see that we got a hole right there, right? There's a little bit of a hole right there because that's a rest. You got a big hole right in here, right, rhythmically, okay? And then that's pretty much it. The right hand is going pretty active all along. And you'll notice that the left hand follows suit. So I add in a quarter note right here because we got nothing going on in the right hand, so I might as well add something on in the left hand, okay? This is whole note because that's pretty active. Whole note, pretty active, right? Whole note because we're starting with that 8th rest right there, right? So that's filling in that space, and then the right hand fills it out. Here, I decided, okay, well, let me, hit that beat 4 as well, just to kind of, accentuate that beat 4, and we did the same thing right here. And then you'll notice really right down in here, this is where we really start to add in a lot more because the right hand is resting, okay? So let's take a look at this. So you notice left hand, light, allowing that right hand to really come out, right? You could hear that right hand, the left hand is not overdoing it. I'm also not... Right? I'm not overplaying the left hand. I'm not playing too much rhythm in the left hand to take away from the right hand. When the right hand is active, like with these nice lines, you really don't have to do a lot in the left hand. Just a few little chord stabs now and again really adds quite a bit. All right, so that's step number 7. Step 8, now we're going to start to create a little bit more interest by adding in some of these approach notes, enclosures, to really elevate our jazz line. Now this is a little bit more advanced, okay? So this is, I consider this more of a bonus step, right? So you'll notice here, in these sections that are highlighted, I added in some extra notes, right? So when we go back, right, if we go back here, right, remember you saw that this was just a chord arrest right there? Now what am I doing? I'm adding in 2 eighth notes. And what I'm doing is I'm adding in a half step above, half step below, resolving to the targets. Now, all of this stuff is detailed in a lot of detail in the Confident Improviser program, right, back at Jazzedge Academy. So if you're interested in this approach and interested in really kind of digging in and understanding these enclosures and approach notes and want some exercises and whatnot, then check out the Confident Improviser. All right, so let me play this for you so you can hear what this sounds like, because this really starts to elevate the sound. Right? Isn't that nice? Right? That little half step resolution in here really adds so much to the improvisation. Right? So that's, sorry. Now before it was just ending right here, but I made it a triplet so that I could get these 2 notes in there. And that's a double chromatic, which leads me up to the B. So for the F sharp minor 7 flat 5 measure, right here. And what happened here? I resolved to the E, did a whole step above, half step below, and I'm resolving up to that E. So those little enclosures and approach tones, that's the flavor, right? That's the spice in jazz piano improvisation. But notice we didn't start there, okay? So to review again, where do we start? Number 1, we learn how to play the lead sheet. Okay? Number 2, we learn the chords. Number 3, we learn some rhythms. Number 4, we now create a basic shell, a basic roadmap of our improvisation using our chord shells and just simple chord tone whole notes, right? Hitting the root, 3rd, 5th, or 7th using chord tones. After that, we fill in the roadmap with 1 rhythm. We used 1 rhythm and applied our chord tones to that 1 rhythm, right? That was step number 5. Then step number 6, we altered the rhythms, right? So we changed the rhythms around, we added some new rhythms and applied notes to those new rhythms. That's step 6. Step 7, we added in the left hand, a little bit of comping in the left hand to make it so that the left hand is like kind of like working with that right hand, not just sitting there doing nothing, but actually like, doing something and giving a little bit of rhythm to our improvisation. And then finally here in step number 8, now we're starting to add in these enclosures. Now, you can get a lot of mileage just using your chord tones. So now if I go and I just improvise using chord tones here, and my approaches, right? I mean, like, you could really get some really nice sounding improvisation utilizing chord tones. So all of that thought of, oh, I have to be doing my scales, I got to know all these scales and all these keys, you don't have to do that to start with jazz piano improvisation. How do I master this material? So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you go back to the site and make sure that you take a look at the practice actions and make sure that you download all of the free material to practice, right? That includes the sheet music, that includes the chords, that includes the backing tracks, all of that. There's a nice little handout of information that you can download back at Jazzedge Academy, right? So all you need to do is click the link in the description below, all right, put in your email address there, and then I will send you all of that stuff, right? Everything will get set up for you. You'll get an email, you know where to go, you can do all the practice actions, you can mark them complete, all of that good stuff, right? So it's a great way of staying really nice and focused. And then lastly, I want to thank you very much for taking the time for listening to this video. If you could do me a favor, if you could like the video, if you could hit that subscribe button, that would be great. I'm going to be sharing a lot more of these mini lessons with you in which we go into some really good detail, step by step, for how to learn jazz piano. All right? Thank you all very much for joining me. I will see you in that next mini lesson.